I was happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from StreetScores, and I'm finally back. We were doing like 3 videos a day, and then I go over 36 hours without a video. Super busy. Long story short, we're here to talk about how the Cincinnati Bengals probably may need to go ahead and trade Trey Hendrickson, but there's an update to why that may not happen. We're going to dive into that. Also, of course, I got to update y'all on the fact that the Commanders re-signed defensive lineman Clelin Ferrell and Jaylen Holmes. And of course, we got to dive into, are we finally done with the defensive line position, or do we still need to prioritize it draft-wise? And also, of course, I have a trivia question for you. On this date, March 17th, I'm recording this at 1:30 a.m., 1914, the year 1914, Sammy Baugh was born in Temple, Texas. The Pro Football Hall of Fame quarterback spent his entire 16-season NFL career, 1937 through 52, in Washington after playing football, basketball, and baseball at what university? Hey, man, let me know who's the real ball knowers in the chat, man. Of course, I'm going to give y'all the answer at the end of the video. Before we dive into everything, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned to all of the content. Really appreciate y'all for supporting every video. Even though I was gone for the past 40 hours, y'all still pulled up and was supporting all of the videos I already did. And I'm still working on other videos that I need to catch up on, like breaking down Eddie Goldman and I still haven't even talked about Javon Kinlaw, all of those guys, Tress Way, Jeremy McNichols, all of that is on the way. I promise you, I'm not skipping a player. We just got to work our way backwards. And without further ado, let's go and dive into the video right now, man. Let's get it. Adam. All right, so out of nowhere, breaking news, and it's a good thing. I guess I kind of waited because originally my plan was to try to do this video a little bit sooner. I already had all my Clelin Ferrell notes together. I already had all of my Jaylen Holmes notes together. And then out of nowhere, right before 11 p.m., Jordan Schultz tweets and reports breaking news. The Bengals wide receivers Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins have both now signed contract extensions with the Cincinnati Bengals. And Ja'Marr Chase gets 4 years, $161 million with $112 million guaranteed, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. And T. Higgins got 4 years, $115 million with the first 2 years guaranteed, making him the highest paid wide receiver 2 in NFL history. Even though I'm not sure who's necessarily tracking for top paid wide receiver 2s. He just assumed that with the fact that T. Higgins is a wide receiver 2, he's making top 7 money. Either way, though, I mean, this is a crazy situation. The Bengals really messed up by allowing this to go into this year. I mean, they delayed paying Ja'Marr Chase another year. They franchise tagged T. Higgins last year. Then they just franchise tagged them again. But now they went ahead and paid him. So I know they're happy. I know Joe Burrow's happy to finally have his 2 receivers. But at the same time, man, how are you going to pay everybody else? I mean, these guys basically have to go out there and score 70 points a game at this point. Right now, highest paid wide receivers by average per year. Ja'Marr Chase with $40.25 million per year. Justin Jefferson at 35. CeeDee Lamb at 34. A.J. Brown at 32. Amon-Ra. And shouts out to Devonta Smith for taking a somewhat pay cut to help contribute. Allowed them to even sign guys like Zach Bond so they can go win that Super Bowl. Like, Devonta Smith deserves a lot more credit for the selflessness that he displayed by taking less money with his deal so that they could go win a Super Bowl, and then they did it. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, $30.02 million. Tyreek Hill at 30, and Brandon Ayuk with 30 as well. Fresh off of an ACL and MCL injury, and the 49ers are trying to get a 3rd-round pick for that, a guy that expensive. And then T. Higgins right below that at about $28.75 million per year. Crazy. But Jordan Schultz also points out the fact that the Bengals put their money where their mouth is. Joe Burrow is under contract through 2029, Ja'Marr Chase through 2029, and T. Higgins through 2028. Nobody, at least offensively, is going anywhere, and all of them are getting the money that they wanted. They're all very happy. But at the same time, though, Jason Over the Cap points out that the Bengals will certainly be a strong case study in the future because now they have $124 million per year invested in just quarterback and top 2 wide receivers. That's it. The Dolphins are second at 111 per year, a whole 13 less nearly. Then you have the Eagles third at 108 million, Cowboys fourth at 98.5 million, and it ain't working. And the Lions are fifth at 88.3 million. That is crazy. So the Bengals, I mean, all of those, a lot of those are crazy just in general, but the fact that the Bengals are that much higher than anybody else, it's not looking too pretty, especially defensively for those guys. So now they have 2 of the top 10 highest paid receivers in the entire NFL. Is it potentially time to trade for Trey Hendrickson to another team? Most notably like us, the Washington Commanders, right? Well, I do want to present this to you. I want to make sure that the reason I'm talking about this is so that you kind of hold your horses a little bit. Because Tom Pelissero also went on to tweet that the deals were in place with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins late last week. Chase is now the NFL's higher paid non-quarterback, while Higgins is a repeat franchise tag. Dance is over. Next up, though, trying to work out a deal with Trey Hendrickson. The sides have been in contact recently. And, I mean, it's been clear from Trey Hendrickson that he wants to get paid his money, but at the same time, he really doesn't want to leave. And also, the Bengals do not want to trade him. You know, I felt like a Trey Hendrickson trade was always more likely than a Myles Garrett trade, even since over a month ago before Myles Garrett resigned. But at the same time, Trey Hendrickson doesn't want to go either. And, you know, it's really hard to get elite talents off of teams. That's why that Laramie Tunsil trade, I truly feel like a lot of y'all do not fully grasp the concept of how ridiculous that trade was, like how rare, how insane that trade was for us to get a top 3 at worst, top 5 tackle in the NFL via trade. Those guys don't ever hit the market. Certain positions like wide receiver, edge rusher, offensive tackle, like the quarterbacks especially, they do not hit the open market. Ronnie Stanley never even had a chance to hit free agency by the time the legal tampering period started. We can go down the list of all of the elite players that their contracts were up going into the 2025 season, but teams were not letting those guys go. They'll figure it out. Keep the great ones at elite, at high value positions, and then we'll just figure the rest out later. Even if we got to fill in the blanks with some rotational pieces, we're not letting these elite starters go at premium positions. Again, that's why it's even more amazing that we somehow got Laramie Tunsil from the Texans. That is amazing work from Adam Peters, in my opinion. And so Trey Hendrickson is an elite player at an elite premium position, edge rusher. Probably only second to quarterback is edge rusher, quarterback, and left tackle right now as far as the most premium positions in all of football. So even though the Bengals have paid their quarterback, they've paid 2 wide receivers, they're going to do whatever it takes to find a way to trade Trey Hendrickson. And I don't think people truly understand, when you think about it, yeah, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins got ridiculous money, but I'm assuming that the way that the contracts are set up, naturally under a contract extension, you make this upcoming season cheaper. So technically, if anything, the Bengals gained more cap space from this. And then if they were to re-sign and extend Trey, well, not re-sign, but just purely extend and change his contract for Trey Hendrickson, and then that will make them have a little bit more cap space for this year as well. Then they got to, the backloaded more than likely is how they're going to do the contracts. And then they have to worry 2026, 2027 wise, but 2025 wise, if they really want to re-sign Trey Hendrickson, they could get it done cap space wise this year. The problem is 2026, 2027, 2028 and beyond. Again, all of those guys are signed. Well, Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow are signed through 2029, like I already told y'all, and then T. Higgins through 2028. And I'm pretty sure whatever they try to do with Trey Hendrickson, they're going to try to extend him through at least 2028, maybe even through 2029 as well, even though he is already 31 years old. But either way, though, I mean, it's the same thing for us like Terry. We're talking about, do we have enough cap space to extend Terry McLaurin and give him a bigger deal? But he could be making more money per year annually, but still be cheaper in 2025 with the extension. That's why I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. But then you got to remember, we didn't give Samuel Cosmi that big time extension until I think a week before the regular season started, something right before we started playing real Sunday football. So maybe that's the timeline of when Adam Peters does extensions for his current players and things like that. But again, an extension, if anything, saves you a little bit money against the cap, 2025 wise specifically, not the rest of the time. But usually these contracts are pretty backloaded, and those first couple of years are cheaper than the back few years. It's just a lot of guaranteed money up front, so I'm pretty sure the owner is shedding a tear right now. But cap space wise, their general manager, their head coach, all of their coaching staff, and even the players themselves are probably happy. And it makes sense that they were able to get this done. We'll see if they get Trey Hendrickson done. I feel like at the end of the day, if Trey Trey Hendrickson does get traded, it will be on draft day. Like, we get to draft day, and up to that point, it's been over a month from now, like a month and a couple of weeks from now, and they still don't have an extension done with Trey Hendrickson while they're currently talking to each other right now. It's not like Trey Hendrickson is ignoring them and blocking them off and things like that. Like he's just pouting and holding firm, like, trade me. He wants to come back to the Bengals. He's going back and forth with the Bengals. They're probably negotiating. And if they're doing all of that right now, March 17th, and they still don't have a deal done, an extension done by late April, by the draft, I think that's the time that you probably end up trading for Trey Hendrickson, especially as the draft starts to fall, and maybe we get to like our second round pick, and then we trade for him. I mean, there's been a lot of like blockbuster trades during draft day. I mean, I know this doesn't necessarily like apply to us, but the New England Patriots traded a 4th round pick to Randy Moss during the 2007 draft. It was like the final day though, which was interesting. But I mean, the AJ Brown trade came out of nowhere. That happened on draft night. So we'll see. I'm not saying that it's likely that we'll trade for Trey Hendrickson, but if you're one of the people that is hoping that the Commanders somehow found a way to get that done, you better hope that he lasts until the draft. And then if he makes it to the draft with no contract extension, I think that drastically increases his chances of being traded. Maybe not necessarily to the Commanders, but to somebody. Now, moving on to the next half of the video, the Washington Commanders re-signed 2 defensive linemen. We're going to start with Clelin Ferrell first. I want to talk about him the longest because he was a projected starter last year. Shouts out to Ian Rappaport. He was like supposed to start, but he kept getting hurt. Ian Rappaport said the Commanders are bringing back veteran defensive lineman Clelin Ferrell. Source said, as the former first rounder returns after 10 starts and 3.5 sacks with 26 tackles. But mind you, a lot of that, even in those 10 starts, he was hurt in those games. Sometimes he got hurt and had to leave the game. So those 10 starts are a little misleading. And I mean, out of those 3.5 sacks, he probably got like the first 2 within like the first couple of weeks. I thought he was destined for a double-digit sack season the way he started the season. And then it just tailed off. I mean, the nagging injuries, he was dealing with them all off season. It started all the way back in like mandatory mini camps, and then it was in training camp as well, preseason, and then it just followed him all throughout the year. We were hoping by the time the regular season came around after he sat out a while that he would be good to go, and then he kind of was, and then he re-aggravated it. So I don't know what's going on there. Shouts out to John Com. He said Washington has re-signed defensive end Clelin Ferrell to a 1-year deal per source. There's no way we would have signed him for anything longer than 1 year. Ferrell provides another end who can help against the run. The Commanders have loaded up on the run-stopping depth along the front, and I got to talk about why that's both a good thing and a bad thing. We'll get there soon. Either way, though, shouts out to Commanders Wire for pointing out the fact that the Washington Commanders continued with their flurry of 1-year deals on Saturday, re-signing veteran defensive end Clelin Ferrell for just the 25 season alone. Last March, though, Washington signed the Virginia native and former number 4 overall pick in the 2019 NFL Draft to a 1-year deal worth only $3.75 million. I'm not exactly sure how much he's making on this deal right now, but based off of how he got hurt, like last year, he was when we signed him, it was like, okay, he's probably going to be one of the guys that's out there on first down. Does he play like a starting level amount of snaps? I'm not sure, but he'll be out there first and second down, so you can technically label him a starter, and we still got him for less than $4 million. After all of the injuries and the injury proneness that we had to deal with last year, my point is this deal now for 2025 may even be slightly cheaper. We'll see. The former Clemson star dealt with the knee injury all season, but missed only 3 games and finished with 3.5 sacks. I mean, that injury was really bothering him. He was honestly never 100%, so I don't want to judge him too harshly, but at the same time, your best ability is your availability, and if you're never 100%, we can't rely on you, so you do got to count that against him, but don't like judge his stats like looking purely at his box score and being like, oh, he only had 3.5 sacks and 10 starts last season, he's trash. If he's healthy, maybe he should be able to give you more than that at least, but the problem is he ever going to be healthy? Ferrell was a part of Washington's defensive end rotation and played 41% of the team's defensive snaps. Ferrell was a part of the rotation with Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler Jr., Javonte John Baptiste, and F.A. Obata. Fowler will not be back in 2025. Of course, he signed a 1-year deal with the Cowboys where he played for 2 seasons prior to signing with the Commanders last March. And of course, Dante Fowler led our team with 10.5 sacks. But Ferrell, still only 27 years old, y'all. I mean, still potentially getting into his prime, just now entering it. We'll see. I don't have like a lot of hope and faith behind Clelin Ferrell, especially mostly because of the injury situation. But he's only 27 years old. He has 16 career sacks. But We just got to see what's going on as far as getting to the quarterback. We know he can stop the run and set the edge. At the very least, he can do that. But can he stay on the field and can he get after the quarterback? That's the biggest concern. So right now, the Commanders, based off of the signings and moves we made this offseason, we are playing the least about the trenches. Like, we are not going into this season without being stronger, bigger, and in certain ways at least better, especially like defensive line wise, run stopping wise, than we were last year. I mean, like, out of like the double digit signings we've done so far this year, I think like at least half of them have been defensive linemen. It's crazy. Like, all of these videos that I'm talking about and breaking down, every time we re-sign somebody, every time we sign somebody, it seems like I always end up back on this defensive line conversation. Now, first of all, this Clelin Ferrell signing and the Michael Dieter signing as well made it even more obvious that we shouldn't read too much into every signing that the Commanders do this offseason, especially, man. Like, some of these guys are just 90-man roster offseason practice guys that don't have even much of a chance of making the final 53-man roster anyway and even playing on Sundays for us. And so we really shouldn't read into every signing like a guy's supposed to be playing on Sundays. And I'm mentioning that so that Commanders fans don't get their hopes up with like every signing. Every time you see John Com, Tom Pelissero, or whoever, or even me posting a video about it, don't just assume that we're viewing this guy in the lens of a guy that's going to contribute a lot during the regular and postseason. I don't want y'all to see, oh, the Commanders have signed this guy, then you go look at his highlights and or his Pro Football Focus grade, and then get disappointed that the player doesn't look like a Pro Bowler based on those grades and those highlights that you watched. I just want y'all to make sure y'all temper out y'all expectations, and my point is that Clelin Ferrell, especially Michael Dieter, and maybe some of these other guys that we've signed are just here just so we have a 90-man roster, a deep rotation of guys that will be able to at least you practice with, practice against for the offense, things like that. But the problem here is that I'm not optimistic that even Clelin Ferrell, who just started, who was supposed to start last year, will even make the roster, which is crazy. I mean, do they still view him as that player in 2025? I mean, I know Clelin Ferrell was supposed to start last year, but he couldn't stay healthy, which is why Dante Fowler had to play so many first down and second down snaps last year, which was not what the plan was supposed to be going into the season at all. So Clelin is at the very least unreliable right now health-wise, and with all of the defensive end signings we've made, specifically on the edge, guys that set the edge and stop the run and don't offer much pass rush potential. I mean, this Clelin Ferrell signing is like very redundant because that's literally who he is. Edge setting, run stopper that can't consistently get to the quarterback. That's pretty much most of our edge rusher room right now. So either he, as in Clelin Ferrell, isn't making the roster, the 90-man roster, because there's only been so many edge rushers you're going to keep, or one of these other guys that we've signed this past week that I've done videos on won't make the roster. I mean, I'm never mad at a densely populated competition at any particular position group, but it's crazy. The only downside is that almost all of these guys have the exact same weaknesses and strengths. Can stop the run, can't rush the passer. And if you're looking at the like edge rusher depth chart right now, especially, I'm going to go ahead and throw Javon Kinlaw in there because I believe he will play some of that elephant end type of stuff. We'll see. But you have Dietrich Wise Jr., Dorrance Armstrong, Javon Kinlaw, Clelin Ferrell, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Jacob Martin, Andre Jones. Maybe you can, there's a situation where maybe Jazon Newton rotates in at edge sometimes, but Frankie Louvu is like a Sam linebacker that rushes off the edge quite a bit as well. I mean, Frankie Louvu at the very least shows some pass rush potential, but most of these guys are just the same guy. It's crazy. So shouts out to Josh Taylor. He brings up a good point. Washington truly has a type when it comes to the defensive line. If you're doing a mock draft and selecting edge who's bad against the run, throw it away. This also has nothing to do with size because Pierce Ezeraku, I hope that's how you pronounce that name, can stop the run at an elite level even though they're only 245 pounds. So he's basically saying don't just automatically look at weight and say, oh, they can't stop the run because they're under 280 or something like that. They're only 245 pounds. Guys that are pretty small can still stop the run. Jacob Martin does a pretty decent job of stopping the run, even though I see him as more of like a situational pass rusher, Dante Fowler replacement. We'll see. But at the same time, even though those are great points, I still feel like defensive line, especially the edge rusher group, is, again, far too redundant. Right now, playoff game on the line, up to 1 minute left, and our defense is on the field. It's 3rd and 6. Who is about to get a strip sack to win the game for us and end the game? Please point to him right now, which takes me to my main point. Like I've said, after every single one of these defensive lineman breakdown videos that I've been doing, we still need a pass rushing edge rusher. That's why I wanted Dante Fowler back, but it didn't happen. But we need a guy who can replace Dante Fowler's 10.5 sacks. As of right now, Dorance Armstrong is like the only starter that has the potential to step up. And then Jacob Martin is the only guy that we've signed this offseason that may have some potential to step up and take Dante Fowler's place. Maybe Javonte Jean-Baptiste, former 7th round pick from this franchise just last year, handpicked by Adam Peters and flashed at times outside of the time that he got hurt. And then even when he came back, he didn't flash like as much as he did earlier before he got hurt. Maybe he was still a little banged up and playing through injuries, but like that's literally it. Those are like the only guys that have the true potential to maybe be able to get to the quarterback. You have one starter in Dorance Armstrong, and you're especially paying him like it. Then you have two backups in former 7th round pick that didn't play much last year in Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Jacob Martin, who you just signed from the Bears, that even though I feel like he was technically more efficient than Dante Fowler last year when it comes to sacks per snap, because Dante Fowler had 10.5 sacks, but at the same time, he played far more snaps than Jacob Martin. You can agree Jacob Martin was more efficient than Dante Fowler, but at the same time, man, I'm not just expecting that. But, you know, optimistic, glass half full, maybe with Jacob Martin in this environment, with these coaches, maybe he is our Dante Fowler replacement. Maybe it was more of a product of the system than Dante Fowler as the individuals. But right now, we have a bunch of run-stopping edge setters. We don't have a lot of great quarterback getters. But me personally, I'm not looking for a Dante Fowler replacement, even though I keep talking about it. I'm looking for a Dante Fowler upgrade. We shouldn't just stop at Dante Fowler like, oh, we found our next Dante Fowler, we're good. No, we need to go beyond that. And y'all know me, man, I feel like we need to treat this free agency period as if the draft doesn't exist. Because who knows who's going to be available in the first round, just period, let alone with the fact that we're picking 29th overall. And so at this point, really the only option I can think of to get an elite pass rusher or a guy with at least the potential to be one is trading for Trey Hendrickson. But again, like we've already discussed, I don't really see it being likely. And you can't wait until the draft to be like, okay, you know, now since we can't get Trey Hendrickson, now we got to figure it out. I mean, again, Trey Hendrickson trading him is very unlikely. So right now, our best hope is finding an elite talent and hoping that that guy falls in the draft for whatever red flags. Again, I like to use free agency with the strategy of assuming that like the draft doesn't even exist. You need to figure out everything. You need to basically already feel like you have a roster that can go win a Super Bowl before the draft even happens, especially when you're picking 29th overall. The draft is supposed to be extra. You're supposed to draft for ceiling, best player available, not necessarily for needs. And right now, we have a major need at pass rushing edge rusher. But I mean, maybe there is some hope for some elite pass rushing talent to fall to us. Like I've already talked about in previous videos, of course, Abdul Carter's not making it to us. Already highly doubt Shamar Stewart makes it to us, even though freak athlete, crazy high ceiling, but huge red flag of literally no production in college. None. All of that freakish athleticism, can't get to the quarterback for some crazy reason. He gets a lot of pressures, doesn't get sacks. And y'all remember the Preston Smith days, that always one step away that used to annoy the mess out of us. I'm not sure. But then again, Shamar Stewart is a freakier athlete, so we'll see. But maybe James Pierce Jr. with the off-the-field concerns. I mean, this guy had to wear a hoodie during his combine workouts and testing because he forgot the shirt at the hotel. The biggest day of your life. He had off-the-field concerns before that. You know how many teams probably already scratched him off of their big boards because of that? I'm not saying it's enough teams to where I expect him to make it to pick 29, but there are some red flags there. Maybe there's some potential for him to fall. Michael Williams, I felt like a couple of years ago was going to be the one of the most talented players, period, in the entire draft. I still firmly believe that fully healthy, Michael Williams is a top 10 player in this draft class. And I feel like in a couple of years from now, I'll get the last laugh and you will see it. But at the same time, he was not very productive this year, but it came out. I think Jalen Walker said it for him. He didn't come out and say it himself. He doesn't want to, put any excuses out there, I believe. But I think Jalen Walker was like, yeah, Michael Williams was hurt like all season. And that's why, like, he was basically playing at like 60%. He was only out there because he just didn't want to let Kirby Smart down and things like that. So Michael Williams, he lacked production, But at the same time, do you buy the injury excuse? Because this guy, when we're talking about CIN, when we're talking about built in a lab, he is like one of the freakiest athletes, really edge rushers we've seen coming out of a draft in a long time, like years. Like, it's that ridiculous of a ceiling. And then you have Mike Green. Maybe he falls due to lack of competition that he went against. You know, he led the NCAA last year in college football in sacks, but it's like, who did he play? And then Nick Scordon, I'm not too particularly excited about him, so I'm not really even looking at him. And then how about like the outside linebackers, the 3-4 outside linebackers, kind of tweeners that can play off-ball linebacker and some edge, kind of like some Frankie Louvu types. You have Jalen Walker, who you have several red flags there. Again, you have the tweener, where some people feel like he's not fast enough to cover, and then also not big enough to truly be a dominant edge rusher at the NFL level. Even though, I mean, he's basically literally Micah Parsons in every way, except for the fact that he didn't go to Penn State, but it is what it is. Either way, though, there's red flags there, because also he wasn't very productive outside of when we played Texas. When we played against Texas, Jalen Walker looked like literally Micah Parsons. Against other teams, not as much. Maybe that's enough to make him fall. And then he's also hurt right now. He couldn't even take part in my Georgia Pro Day because he's so banged up right now. So maybe that lets him fall. We'll see. And then Jahad Campbell. I mean, I don't even necessarily need to provide an argument as to why he may fall. A lot of people have him projected to fall anyway to pick 29. Like, you have ESPN has him ranked as the 27th overall player. Todd McShay has him 31st. NFL.com has him 41st. Draft Buzz has him 42nd. I mean, some people see him going like mid first round, but a lot of people think he actually will just straight up be available at pick 29 for us. And I think he has like Frankie Louvu, but maybe a better, like, you can actually set him off the edge and better pass rush potential version of Frankie Louvu. So I would love him as well. So there are options there that maybe at least one of those guys will be available at 29, but it's not looking pretty. Right now, rushing the passer wise, we lack that. We improved mightily in run stopping and edge setting, which was arguably our biggest weakness on the entire team last year, especially when it came to the outside. You know, run defense alone, we were like dead last in the NFL. But like, of any way that you can split up run defense, specifically run defense on the outside from the edge rushers, was the worst part of our entire team last year. And then they weren't playing. They went and signed as many run stopping edge setters as possible that were available. We went and brought in, between signings and re-signings, we went from like one and a half, maybe two, if Clelin Ferrell was healthy, to like 6 or 7. Like, they were not playing. They said, hey, one thing about 2025, we gonna stop some run. They even brought in Will Harris as a safety and Jonathan Jones as a corner, who are both great run stoppers. They're great tacklers, and that's a really underrated part about stopping the run, especially to the outside. You need DBs that can disengage from wide receivers and that can also make open field tackles. So we're going to be better in that department as well. So we're going to be way better run stoppers, but at the same time, who is getting to the quarterback? I'm going to keep asking y'all that. We'll see. Again, we have Dorrance, as of how the roster currently is today as I'm recording this, we have Dorrance Armstrong, Jacob Martin, and maybe Javonte John Baptiste is the only guys who like maybe even has some potential. We'll see about Javon Kinlaw. I mean, there's only but like a handful of guys that are that big, that explosive, that athletic on the entire planet. Forget the NFL, the entire planet. So there's the potential there. We got to see if he can do it as an edge rusher, but I think he'll be more of a defensive tackle than an edge rusher. I think he'll be a little bit of both, but I see him being more so used as like a defensive tackle. So I'm not exactly sure if I even count him. But now, moving on, the Washington Commanders also went and re-signed Jaylen Holmes. And this was updated by his personal agent. It was announced that the Steelers were re-signing Daniel Ukweli, and then also that we were re-signing Jaylen Holmes from the agent himself. And this is, of course, more depth and versatility on the defensive line, because Jaylen Holmes can play some defensive line, like some defensive tackle and some edge rusher, depending on what you need. And he's 29 years old. He was drafted by the Vikings in the 4th round of the 2018 draft out of Ohio State. He was entering the final year of his 4-year, $3.2 million deal that included $730,000 signing bonus when Minnesota cut him loose in September. He signed with the Saints practice squad and bounced on and off throughout the season. Then the Giants signed him to a 1-year deal the following year, but he was among one of their final roster cuts. And then from there, Holmes had a stint with the Bears before catching on with the Jets at the start of the 2023 season. Then he later signed to the active roster with the Commanders last season. I mean, it's not really much to speak of. Like, he had a sack against the Bears. But I mean, he literally came out of nowhere mid-season. He was with the Jets for the first 5 weeks. And then the only decent game, I guess you could argue, that he had, especially according to Pro Football Focus, was the first game of the season against the San Francisco 49ers, if you want to go try to look up some highlights about that. And then when he came to us, and by the time he started playing for us week 7, Pro Football Focus felt like he had a pretty decent game against the Giants, a decent game against the Cowboys the first time that we played them, and then they feel like his best game was the second time that we played the Eagles in the regular season, with a 74.8 overall grade, a 70.8 run defense grade, and then a 63.9 pass rush grade. So, I mean, there's that, and all for the little bit of highlights that I could watch. I'm not about to sit here and even act like and lie to y'all that I've just sat down and did like a hours long run of all 22 on this guy, but whatever I could watch, like the little bit that I saw of him of last year, I mean, there's some talent there. But this is a guy that, again, just like even with Clelin, Ferrell, or one of these other guys we've signed this past week, wouldn't be surprised if any of these guys don't make the final 53-man roster. Jaylen Holmes had to play for us last year out of the fact that we had injuries. Jonathan Allen was hurt. I mean, I think we literally ended up signing Jaylen Holmes because Jonathan Allen got hurt. That was like the only reason he not only got on the field, like we signed him, but the fact that he even got on the field. Clelin Ferrell was constantly banged up at edge rusher. Dante Fowler is seen as a situational pass rusher that shouldn't be on the field first and second downs. Now we have a bunch of healthy defensive tackles and edge rushers. Again, we don't have any pass rushing, but as Jaylen Holmes is more of a run stopper than the edge rusher than a pass rusher, a lot of these guys that I've talked about this past week are not making this final 53-man roster. At this point, we're just waiting to see which names do make the final 53-man roster and which don't. And I'm not gonna lie, some guys may not even make it after the draft. We may draft an edge rusher and then one of these guys that we've talked about, Jaylen Holmes, Clelin Ferrell, one of these guys at the bottom of the depth chart, maybe Jacob Martin. I mean, we still have Andre Jones. Who knows if they like Javonte Jean-Baptiste. I think he's here to stay. But some of these guys that we've been talking about this past week, we'll see, man. I mean, I think Dietrich Wise is probably even projected to maybe even start at one of our edge rusher positions. I'm not too sure how safe he is. So after this draft, things can get a little interesting. Again, right now, it's either trade for Trey Hendrickson or hope that an elite talent falls to you at 29 that could come in and start immediately and get after the quarterback, which is really hard to do. You may even have to trade up for one of those guys. Those are really our only options for being able to rush the passer right now, unless you see an unsung hero, Dorrance Armstrong improving mightily, Javonte Jean-Baptiste far outliving his 7th round draft pick, Jacob Martin suddenly catching on here to turn into a double-digit sack demon when he couldn't do it elsewhere. And then lastly, before we get up out of here, also the Ravens reached an agreement on a 2-year deal for Cooper Rush, and I'm not gonna lie, I exhaled a little bit, man. I'm sick of it, bruh. Just like Daniel Jones, man. Cooper Rush, terrible against everybody else. Sees the burgundy and gold uniforms, sees red, I guess, and then just goes Super Saiyan. Just turns into like at least an 80 overall for no reason against us only. Shouts out to Ben Standig for pointing out the fact that in 5 career starts against Washington, Cooper Rush has led the Dallas to a 4-1 record with 5 touchdowns passes, 0 interceptions, and a 117.1 quarterback rating. I don't know what it was against us, but that boy Cooper Rush was going crazy. Y'all thought Daniel Jones was bad. Cooper Rush was even better. And then shouts out to Ben Standig. He said, in other words, bon voyage. Like, we're happy to see him gone. Also, for what it's worth, Marcus Mariota is the clear-cut quarterback 2 leader in the NFC East until further notice. We have the best backup, and I would easily argue we have the best starter. So we have by far the best quarterback situation in the entire NFC East. I'm happy about that. And I'm also happy about the fact that we don't have to deal with Cooper Rush nor Daniel Jones anymore. Because, boy, oh my God, man, y'all don't understand, man. I was sick of it. I was tired of watching these guys that are bums every other Sunday go against us and finally look like Tom Brady mixed with Michael Vick, man. I was sick of it. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know for everything discussed in the video. Please still follow that like button, still follow the subscription button, still follow the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release informative and opinion video just like this one. And of course, man, the answer to the trivia question, as promised, is Texas Christian. Shouts out to Sammy Ball, man, for putting the burgundy and gold on the map for real, man. One of the first real ones to do it for our organization, and to really give us some serious history to be proud of, man. It would be nice to have been alive back then to kind of see it, or at least to be alive during the 80s to see some of that. But hey, man, we're about to get back to that right now. Burgundy and gold greatness is on the way back, man. I truly believe it. This is the first time in my lifetime I've seen us ever be a Super Bowl contender, so I'm excited. But either way, man, of course, again, let me know in the comment section how you feel about the whole Trey Hendrickson situation. Let me know how you feel about the re-signing of Clelin, Ferrell, and Jaylen Holmes. Let me know how you feel about Cooper Rush and Daniel Jones no longer being in the division, and if you're happy like I am. Of course, really appreciate y'all. Make sure you leave a like on the way out. Shouts out to everybody, man. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.